1. When I was 21, I transferred to a college in San Francisco. I checked out a room for rent on Craigslist. It was in a really nice 2-bedroom apartment. It was cheap rent and close to campus, so it was the ideal spot. The girl who lived there was 29 and her name was Beth. She was tall and wide, and she had jet black hair and wore pale makeup. She seemed nice, although a little quiet. But she seemed to like me, and agreed to let me move in. So far, so good. The first night we were there, we went out for pizza, and that's when I could tell that something was a bit off with her. Throughout dinner, she kept telling me how much I looked like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say, so I shrugged it off with a thanks. I mean, I look nothing like Shia LaBeouf, so it didn't make any sense to me. When we got back home, she asked if I had seen her room yet. I said no, and so she took me to see it. Her walls were covered with posters of Shia LaBeouf. She had even printed out photos of him all over her mirror. She owned all his movies. I didn't know what to make of it. It was creepy. The whole night she had been saying I look like him, and now it's obvious to me that she's obsessed with the guy. A few weeks passed, and I never really saw her that much. We didn't spend any time together, really. She would come home from work and practically run to her room. She would spend the whole night in there. She had this creepy high-pitched giggle, and I would hear her giggling through the walls at night. I wondered what the hell she could possibly be doing. Occasionally, she would come out and talk for like 2 minutes, and she would always be slurring her words, so I suspected she was drinking a lot. Sometimes she wouldn't say anything, and she would just stand in the hallway and watch me in the living room. I would turn and see her and be surprised and say, "Hello, Beth." And then there would be a long, awkward pause, and she would give out her creepy, high-pitched giggle. It was uncomfortable being around her. She gave me the chills. One night I woke up at around 2 a.m. because I heard what sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my bedroom, and all the lights were off. But I could still see Beth standing at the front door. She had her face against it, and she was turning the lock back and forth and over again. And every time she turned the bolt, she mumbled my name. Max Barker, Max Barker, Max Barker. Seeing her standing in the dark and mumbling my name really freaked me out. And it doesn't help that she kinda looks like a bigger version of the girl from The Ring. I just quietly went back to my room and tried to sleep. One night I was watching Gladiator, and she stumbled out of her room and turned on the living room light, forcing me to pause the movie, which was annoying. She then asked me if I wanted to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was an uneasy segue into the topic, but I just said sure, then awkwardly sat back to listen to her. 10 minutes into the story, and she was so riled up, she was screaming at the top of her lungs about their breakup. I was worried that the neighbors were going to call the cops, and she wasn't listening to me when I was asking her to lower the volume. Amidst all of her screaming, one thing she said really freaked me out. She was in such a fit and yelled, "I'll slit his fucking throat." That was a big game changer. Suddenly, I had no idea what this girl was capable of. She was practically a stranger, and everything I had seen was becoming alarmingly disturbing. After a few more minutes, she told me thanks for listening, and started doing her giggle. I got out of there pretty fast, and went to my room to go to sleep. I had a pretty unsettled feeling about being in the house with her, and what's worse is that there was no lock in my bedroom door. I pushed the edge of my dresser in front of it, to act as a little barricade. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dresser scraping against the floor. Beth was pushing the door open. I turned on my light, shouting at her to stop. I could see her through the opening of the door. She was so drunk, and had this insane look in her eyes. I pushed the door closed, and yelled at her to go to bed. I could hear her walk back to her room, but I couldn't fall back asleep. The next morning, when I went out into the hallway, my heart dropped. I saw one of her steak knives was on the floor by my door. I got goosebumps all over my arms. All I could think about was her saying she would slit that guy's throat. I confronted her about it, and she said she didn't remember trying to push my door open. She said she didn't even remember telling me about her ex. I had enough. My lease was month to month, so I found a new spot and moved out. About a month after I moved out, she contacted me. I was at the movies and my phone was off. When I got out, I turned my phone on, and to my shock, I received 40+ text messages that she had sent me over the past 2 hours. They were all just insane texts that ranged from everything between, "Hi, how are you?" to, "I fucking hate you." It was insane. I didn't respond, and I never heard from her again. I always wonder if I hadn't set my dresser in front of my door, would she have quietly come into my room and slit my throat? It freaks me out. 2. This happened to me in 2008 in Las Vegas. I was living with my husband and our son, who was about 2 years old at the time. Well, I would frequently take our son to the grocery store early in the evening with me to do some shopping and give my hubby some time alone. I never really worried. The store was literally right outside my neighborhood, plus I lived in a decent neighborhood. I finished my shopping and put my son in his car seat. By the time I finished loading the car, he was passed out, so I decided to quickly fill my tank at the gas station on the other side of the parking lot. While I was pumping gas, a big truck pulls up on the opposite side of my pump. The man pumps his gas, seems to take no notice of me, and leaves. As I'm finishing up, the truck suddenly pulls up next to my car, and a man who looks like he loves meth says, "Excuse me, miss, but I just felt compelled to tell you how beautiful you are. As a matter of fact, the only reason I came to get gas here is because I saw you come in here from the grocery store and just had to be near you. I've been getting the courage to come approach you for a while." I was flattered, thanked him for the compliment, but quickly informed him I was off the market. He responded, "I know, it was worth a shot," and began to pull off. Suddenly he backed up and said, "If you tell your husband what I said, I'll kill him," then drove off. Needless to say, this freaked me out, so I immediately called my husband. He told me not to come directly home in case the guy follows me. So I drove around until I felt that I lost him, then I went home. My husband and I went over it again and again. How could he possibly kill my husband if he doesn't know him or where we live? Then some of the things he said started to ring in my head, like how he'd been watching me at the grocery store. I started to think, how many days has he seen me there? How I told him I was married, he said he knew. Is it possible that he has followed me home on previous occasions? We put extra locks on the doors, took extra precautions, and tried to forget about it. He was probably just some crazy guy, right? Well, about a week later, around 8 or 9 p.m., my husband decided to run up to the gas station to get cigarettes. I was sitting on the computer in our dining room as he left through the garage door, with our son sleeping in his bedroom on the other side of the house. A minute after he left, I heard the garage door into the laundry room open, and somebody come in. I immediately assumed it was my husband grabbing something he forgot. I called out to him and didn't get a response, so I called his name again and received no answer, but could hear someone moving around in the laundry room. I started to worry. All the guns in the house were in our room. I would have to walk right past the laundry room to get to them. Suddenly I heard my 2 pit bulls from my room start growling. Both dogs started barking viciously and ran towards the laundry room, at which point I heard the laundry room door open to the garage and slam shut very quickly. At that point I grabbed my phone and ran into my son's room and called my husband to ask him if he had just returned home for something. To my horror, he said no, that he was at the gas station. I told him there was someone in the house, but I think the dogs had scared him out. He instructed me to stay in our son's room with the door closed, that he was on his way home, so I sat in the dark next to my sleeping son in terror. 2 minutes later I heard the dogs barking. and someone came into the house again through the garage door. After what felt like forever, my husband came into our son's bedroom. He checked the whole house, all around our property, but could not find anybody. We came to the conclusion that the stalker from the gas station must have finally taken his opportunity to catch me alone. And based on what the creepy tweaker had said to me, who else could it have been? What really freaked me out is not knowing how long he had been watching me before that. How long had he been watching me before he approached me at the gas station? And before he came into our home? It really opened my eyes that someone could stalk you without you ever knowing about it until it's too late. I believe my 2 pit bulls saved my life, my son's life, and possibly my husband's too that night. That had my husband not let the dogs in the house before he left, I wouldn't be here right now, nor would my son. And to this day, anytime I have to be home alone, or my new husband and I are sleeping, I have to have my pit bull inside to watch over me. I thank God every day for my pit bull, and the unconditional love and protection she provides me and my family. 3. Back in December of 2012, I received a notice from the manager of the grocery outlet I worked at that we were getting a new member of our overnight crew, scheduled to be in the following night. The crew, who consisted of myself and several others, all worked together for quite some time, and we all grew into good friends. So the next night is myself and 2 others on the schedule when the new guy comes in. I already knew his name to be Cole, so I immediately went up to introduce myself and all that jazz before showing him around and telling him exactly what to expect on any given night. Surprisingly, he seemed to be a quick learner. Not that this shit is complicated, but it can be a bit tricky at first. But never asked any questions or made comments, almost acting as if he either knew what he was being told or that he wasn't interested. Being the supervisor, I was pretty much the authority, but I never used it. Everyone was used to a loud atmosphere, as we would play music and yell a lot. It helped keep us awake and somewhat energized. As I tried to break him in, Cole didn't seem interested, preferring to work alone and not take part in our antics. As time went on, his work began to falter. Soon he began to slow down and disappear to the back of the store for a while, to do whatever, and then return an hour or so later. But I always figured he was being productive and left him alone. What did surprise me, though, was when Cole would use a box cutter. He wouldn't cut off the tape, but instead he would stab the boxes and rip them open. I told him to be careful, but he merely gave me a shrug each time. One day the manager called me and asked me to talk about how Cole had been doing at night. I told him about how he became slower with work and seemed much less interested, seemingly doing the bare minimum to get by. He suggested that I should talk to him, and I agreed. 3 nights later, it's just Brad and myself on the schedule. After doing the usual stuff for a while, it was finally break time. We decided to walk over to the gas station and convenience store nearby to buy some stuff for our lunch break. As we got back, I noticed that the entrance door was left open. Shit, that's not good. Must have forgotten to close it. But Brad said that he did. That's odd. We went inside and continued working until lunch break. We're sitting in the break room, eating and chatting, when we both simultaneously heard something that sounded like one of the freights moving. It happened again thereafter, so I got up to check it out, while Brad stayed inside the break room. I go out to the sales floor and notice that one of the freights had moved a few feet away from where I left it originally. Also, some merchandise had fallen off and was lying on the ground. I began to put the stuff back on the freight when I heard Brad yell my name. Completely used to the yelling, I casually walked back towards the break room and meet up with Brad. He pointed towards the emergency exit and said that someone had just walked out, but the alarm didn't go off. I jogged up to it and peered outside and saw nothing. At first, I thought this was a joke. I laughed it off and told him to stop fucking with me, but he insisted. I went out of the emergency door and walked around the store, but saw no one. I came back in through the front entrance and met up with Brad once again near the break room. What did scare me, though, was when Brad and I walked up to the emergency exit. Brad suddenly turned around and saw somebody walking. He nudged me, and I had just turned around to barely see the person walk towards the freezer and around the corner, which was all the way on the opposite end of the back store area. I ran to catch up with whoever it was, but didn't see anyone when I turned the corner. The freezer was locked, so whoever it was couldn't have gotten inside, unless they have a key, but only I have the key. Brad came up to me and asked if I believed him now. I said I did. Who could be in the store and how did they get in? I then thought of the left open entrance from earlier, and the fact that the emergency exit door alarms were disabled. It must be someone who either works here or is aware of our movements and the alarm system. We headed back to the sales floor to investigate some more. Nothing was knocked off of the shelves, nor was the freight moved this time. I walked up near the front entrance and peered out a window towards the parking lot, but saw nobody. But then, as I turned towards the entrance, I saw somebody walking from the parking lot to the backside of the store. This time I recognized the person. It was Cole. What the fuck? He's not supposed to be working. I yelled out to Brad, who came up to me as I told him that Cole's outside, and he's heading towards the backside of the store. He nods and runs off while I follow. We waited by the emergency exits for about 5 minutes, but Cole never entered. I yelled out to Brad to head to the sales floor, while I stayed back there. I could hear him run off as I stayed by the emergency exit. Out of nowhere, I turned around suddenly and saw Cole standing about 20 feet from me with a box cutter in his hand. I watched on as he glared at me. How the fuck did he end up behind me? I asked him what the fuck he was doing there, and that this wasn't funny. He didn't seem to pick up on that, though. Finally, when he did move, it was to position the box cutter in an upwards cutting position, like he was going to stab my chest or something. But he eventually lowered it down and spoke to me. "Tell the manager I quit." Cole then turned to put the box cutter in his pocket, then walked towards the opposite end once again, towards the freezer, and turned the corner, disappearing. I stood there in shock for about a minute. When Brad came running back to me, he asked if I saw Cole, and I told him I did, heading off towards the freezer. Brad asked what we should do. I told him what happened, but he insisted we just let it go for now. I waited until the manager arrived a couple of hours later, and told him that Cole had told me he quit, but didn't go into any detail. I decided not to tell the manager about what had happened, nor any other co-workers for that matter. I didn't want to escalate this any further than it already had. It wasn't until Brad said something that the police became involved, and I then learned after talking with the authorities that Cole has a mental health record, and I should have reported what happened and not kept it a secret, regardless of my reasoning. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 175. Thank you very much to everyone who allowed me to share the stories in this video. Listening to that last story there, I've certainly worked with some interesting characters over the years, including one who might actually have been a danger. I won't go into details, but after this person left the shop, believe it or not, he was promoted out of sight, became manager of his own shop. He got into a bit of trouble for trying to hit one of the employees with his car. Deliberately, this laddie was standing on the pavement, and he rises up and tries to hit him with his car. Obviously, I can't go into much detail of that, but, well, needless to say, I was very glad that person was no longer someone that I had to work with, because we'd actually almost come to blows one night because he was very difficult to work with. Of course, that's the more extreme of the interesting characters I've worked with. Okay, and with that, I think I'm going to head off for now, folks. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.